Mexico is now one step away from legalizing medical marijuana. The country's legislature overwhelmingly approving a bill this week that could generate $1 to $2 billion in revenue over the next decade. And here to tell us more about it is Danko, senior cultivation editor from the High Times. Danny, it's great to see you. And what we want to know from you is what opportunity would this provide if Mexico does indeed pass this law?
Well, there's a lot of opportunity in the investment sector. There's people that are producing cannabis in Canada that are looking to expand into Mexico. There's a number of stocks out there that are available for people. Also, people should consider that, those are stocks that you can invest in, but there are also moral concerns from some people in the cannabis industry and community about those stocks as well.
Danny, talk to us about this. Obviously, here in the United States, when we have this debate, it's naturally at times a very divisive issue with people firmly falling on either side of the debate. Can you talk to us a bit? What does this ongoing dialogue look like specifically in Mexico?
Well, it looks like it's going to pass. The medical marijuana will pass, which is going to go a long way to taking marijuana out of the hands of the cartels and putting it into the hands of government. It's staggering the amount of crime and violence and murder that's been committed in Mexico by these drug cartels and by the government. So anything we can do to stop this epidemic of killings is going to be a good thing. The other thing is that this is an industry that's never really experienced a glut. Demand has always outpaced supply. So it'll be interesting to see. A lot of these large producers are producing tremendous amounts of cannabis, and so it'll be interesting to see what happens when there's more supply than demand.
Mm-hmm. Danny, what can you tell us about the way in which marijuana is basically largely viewed as for citizens in Mexico right now? Is there like decriminalization efforts? If you get caught with it, are you automatically imprisoned? Is there a fine? Is it legal in some parts? Could you kind of break down how it kind of works throughout the country?
Well, I think right now anything under 5 grams is legal or basically a ticketable offense. I know that the president, Nieto, wants to change that to 28 grams, which is approximately an ounce of marijuana. So it's slowly but surely becoming less and less stigmatized and more legal. But again, I think the Mexican public in general sort of frowns upon marijuana use, but is interested in legalization just based on ending the drug war.
Also, too, what is the spillover effect that this could have on the U.S., right? I mean, the U.S. economy, potentially maybe legislation here in the U.S., but how do you see it affecting the U.S. if it does get passed in Mexico?
Well, it's interesting because Mexico and Canada are both sort of at the forefront right now and also surrounding the United States. So we're changing state by state, but they're changing on a federal level, and I think inevitably we are going to have to change on a federal level as well and take marijuana off of Schedule 1, meaning that there's no medical benefit at all. It sits there with drugs like heroin. So clearly there is medical use of marijuana. Clearly it has efficacy medicinally, so we'd love to see that federal change as is happening in Mexico and Canada.
Dan, let me ask you, Enrique Nieto has been on record as saying he views it as being very crucial that both the United States as well as Mexico are largely on the same page when it comes to their views on marijuana. Could you walk us through why you think that is the case? And is President Nieto's view of it severely different from many of his Mexican president predecessors?
Well, clearly the government is seeing the benefit in taxing this industry. So, in Colorado, millions and millions of dollars of extra dollars are being made taxing the marijuana industry. So I think that they see the money that's involved, and I think there's the money that's saved in the efforts of basically going around and arresting people. So it's a double savings on both ends, and I think it's consistent with what Vicente Fox, former Mexican president, said after he was president there, which is that legalization and decriminalization take the profits out of the hands of these drug cartels and put them into the hands of government, which hopefully can do a lot better work with them.
Okay, so Michigan could be the next U.S. state, at least, to legalize cannabis, maybe as early as 2018. Why Michigan?
Well, Michigan has suffered pretty heavily. It's part of the Rust Belt. The auto industry largely sort of abandoned Michigan in a lot of ways in the last couple of decades. And I think, if you drive around Detroit or other parts of Michigan, as we have done, we have a cannabis cup that's there every year in Clio, which is a suburb of Flint. You can see how devastated the area is basically economically. And so places like that are much more likely to legalize because they can see that the benefits financially for their economy are much better than continuing this fruitless prohibition.
And we know a Republican governor in Michigan as well, when some people within the administration, Republicans, not so keen on legalizing marijuana, at least federally. Danny, also scientific advancements. Would passing this drug or legalizing the drug, at least in Mexico, would that bring any more scientific advancements, I guess, in the medical field for people using cannabis as a treatment?
Absolutely. We're seeing more and more lab results coming in and a lot more testing happening for things like pesticides and all kinds of harmful things that might be on the marijuana, as well as the medical effects and the benefits for people with epilepsy, post-traumatic stress, and a lot of other ailments, brain injuries, and all kinds of things that they're using cannabis for. And so far we've only had an anecdotal evidence, but as cannabis becomes more legal, we will see much more scientific evidence and laboratory type evidence, and a lot of doctors will come forward and talk about the benefits of marijuana for their patients.
Danny, while we have you here, let me ask you this. I certainly understand the argument to declassify marijuana off of the Schedule 1 listing of drugs, especially when you look at the other drugs that it's grouped in with. It's hard to imagine that there are very many comparisons there. But there is another argument that says it's one thing to declassify it off Schedule 1 and another thing to have it fully legalized across the board, many arguing that would actually hurt a lot of entrepreneurs in the space. What's your view on that? Should it be somewhere in between?
Well, my view is that it should be completely legal in the same way that alcohol and nicotine are legal for adult use and for responsible adults to go and procure, making it harder for children to acquire it. So you have these licensed places where you can go and purchase and consume cannabis, and I think that's far more civilized than what we've been doing, which is just locking people up, taking away their college loans, separating them from their families, and just basically ruining people's lives in general over something that's actually much less harmful than alcohol or tobacco.
All right, Danny Danko, Senior Cultivation Editor at High Times. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching Cheddar on YouTube. For more clips of CEO and startup interviews, click one of the videos right here or subscribe to us to get our live alerts right here